Hello guys, in this video we will try to understand about the history of physiology guys. What we come to know when we look at physiology from the outset is that you can see this timeline. The green here represents the common era and the box in red is representing the before common era. So currently we are in 2025, that is the 21st century guys, and currently what have we accomplished? That is now we have this thing called the virtual physiological human projects, that we have this computational model. It is a computer in which we have fed all the normal values of the human physiology, that is the BP, heart rate, and all other parameters of various organ systems. And this machine, in a way, is able to simulate the real human physiology. And what is the use of this is that we can, make some changes and try to see how this uh, machine is sort of responding to that changes. And by interpreting that change, we can, come to a conclusion that, okay, maybe a similar change can occur even in the human body. So what we are hoping is that this project, will become or reach a point where it becomes feasible enough. The fact of the matter is that any virtual machine, can it replicate the human body, is questionable. It is very, our human body is so intricate and complex. So only we are hoping that there will be a time when this project will be, somewhat simulating the human body. And in that, from the 20th century itself, we have started giving the Nobel Prize. The most recent Nobel Prize was given in 2025 for uncovering the mechanisms of peripheral immune tolerance. That is, how is the body able to differentiate the self versus foreign. So nowadays we have this wearable AI driven physiology guys, that is nothing but in the form of smart watches and smart glasses, these smart rings. These things are able to, measure the real-time physiology of the human body. And it is very interesting how Apple watches have, integrated this technique and with the medical systems nowadays. Now we have heard of so many news where the watches have saved life when people fell down, it notified and sent SOS and stuff. So that is how it is getting integrated into the real working system. We also have what is called as the personalized or molecular medicine, wherein we can understand what is the genome of a particular person, and according to his differences, according to the subtle variabilities in his genome, we can give him respective medications which are more suitable for him. And of course, guys, we have developed our medical imaging techniques. Nowadays, we have these instruments which can map the real-time physiology. We have also uncovered CRISPR-Cas9 recently, which is a very excellent gene editing tool. So now we can make precise cuts in the DNA and modify the DNA according to our need. So the application of CRISPR-Cas9 can be in the form of disease modeling. We can basically uh, create animal or cell models which mimic the human disease mutations. So what is the use of this? Then we can, give treatment and see if the treatment is actually helping this disease model or not. Like that we can use. Now, there is also a lot of work going into the circadian physiology. So these are our achievements of the 21st century. And now to reach this point, guys, physiology has undergone so many changes over the period of time. Previously, the questions that we asked had answers, but those answers were not up to the mark. Then we started to get better answers, and these better answers led us to asking more better questions. And this is the manner in which physiology has evolved over a documented history of 5,000 years. So now, guys, let's try to make sense of these boxes that you see here in green and in red. The box in green is actually representing the common era, guys. So guys, when we say we live in the common era, what we basically mean is that we are in the year number 2025 of the common era. So did time not exist before that? Yes, it did existed. But how did we choose to document it is we called it before common era. So there is this agreement among all the nations. It is called as the standardized international calendar system, where we chose a date that is going to be the first year, and anything before that is the before common era, and after that is the common era. Now guys, let us delve into the before common era and try to find out what has happened with respect to the history of physiology and medicine. So we begin from the ancient Egypt, guys, that is 3000 years before the common era, or 5000 years from today. So back then, guys, we had what is called as speculative physiology. It was more of blind guessing. people did ask questions like, why do we fall ill? But the answer were more, more of blind guessing. So back then, medicine was considered as a craft, and heart was believed to be the seat of intelligence. That is, heart is responsible for not only intelligence but also for emotions, and all the main activities of the body is controlled by heart. That was the belief back then. Then let us look at what China was doing in the ancient times. The ancient China, that is 1600 years before the Common Era, or 3600 years from now, they had their own traditional Chinese medicine, guys, and it was based on what is called as Qi, Yin, and Yang. So, what was Qi? Qi was nothing but they said that Qi is this life energy that is flowing throughout your body. So they said that our body has this invisible highways or pathways through which the life energy is flowing. And yin and yang are the opposite forces which are balancing these life energies. And yin is representing coldness, lethargy, weakness, while yang is representing heat, inflammation, and hyperactivity. So guys, if a person is having increased amount of yin, what you do as a treatment is that you increase the yang so that you can, balance these things out. Similarly, if a person has increased amount of yang, you will also increase the yin so that they can balance things out. That was the logic back then. Now let us look at Egypt, guys, in the year 1550 before the Common Era, that is 3500 years from today. So in fact, Egypt had the first documented and the oldest, most complete medical document, guys. This was nothing but the Ebers Papyrus. This was the Encyclopedia of Egypt. And in this, we can, find evidence of the fact that the people back then believed cardiocentric approach towards looking at physiology. So guys, we will see what is this cardiocentric approach a little later. Let us try to look at what we were doing back then in 1500 BC, that is 3500 years ago. So we had our own Ayurvedic system. So the Ayurvedic system was based on doshas, guys. Doshas were nothing but these were the combinations of the 5 elements. This is nothing but the earth, water, fire, air, and ether, that is the space. So there were 3 dosas that we speak of. Number 1 is Vata, second is Pitta, and third is the Kapha. The Vata is a combination of air and ether, that is air and space, and Pitta was a combination of fire and water, and Kapha was a combination of earth and water. So this is what these doshas are representing. It is, you can see here, Vata is representing anxiety, constipation, joint pain. Pitta is representing inflammation, acidity, irritability, and Kapha is representing obesity, congestion, and lethargy. So the idea, guys, is that you balance these doshas. If you don't balance these doshas, or in other words, if one dosha becomes prevalent, this will lead to the manifestation of those characters which are part of that dosha. That is, if Vata gets more prevalent, the person will manifest anxiety, constipation, and joint pains. Probably this is the logic of Ayurveda. So what happened 420 years before the Common Era and 384 years before the Common Era? 2 major things happened, guys. First, the humoral theory came into picture. So the humoral theory says that there are 4 bodily fluids that we have to take into account: the blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. There has to be a balance between these bodily fluids. If at all the balance breaks, then that will manifest as disease. And this was given by Hippocrates. One more thing that we have to note, guys, is that Hippocrates and Galen both believed in the cephalocentric model. So guys, there were 2 models to understand the human body back then. One was the cephalocentric model, another was the cardiocentric model. Hippocrates and Galen both believed in the cephalocentric model, guys. Galen, however, came later in the Common Era, and Hippocrates in the 420 BCE. And what this model basically says is that the brain is the seat of intelligence. It is responsible for intelligence, emotions, and sensations. And these conclusions that Hippocrates came to was based on the clinical observations. On the contrary, if you look at Aristotle, he favored the cardiocentric model of understanding the human body, wherein heart was the seat of intelligence, and heart was responsible for intelligence, emotions, and sensations. And then what was the brain? He said that brain is just this cooling system, which is making sure that the body's heat is controlled. And his philosophical approach was that heart is in the center, is palpable, and the hot center of life. and this heart center needs cooling, and this cooling is provided by the brain. This is approach. And his cardiocentric model was in fact more famous because he was a more influential figure in the Greek society. So what we come to learn from the past is, guys, people have had philosophical approach towards understanding the human body. 335 years before the Common Era, Herophilus did the first systematic human dissection in Alexandria, Egypt. So 310 years before the Common Era, the Pneumatic Theory came into picture. What it said is that life and bodily functions are controlled by special air that is in the surrounding, and because we are breathing this special air, the life is getting filled inside of us. That was the Pneumatic Theory. And around the same time, a distinction was made between sensory and the motor nerves. This is about 2335 years from today. So around 165 years into the Common Era, Galen came into picture, guys. This is 1895 years from today. And Galen dominated anatomy for the next 1500 years, guys. What is interesting here is to note that the anatomy that Galen wrote was based on animal anatomy. He did extensive animal vivisections because at those times, the human dissection was not allowed. So it's not like Galen didn't want to perform human dissections. It's just that in the Roman Empire, human dissections were completely, not allowed. They were banned. And this ban was, for a period of 1300 years into the Common Era. So what Galen did is that he did extensive animal vivisections on monkeys, pigs, and goats, and he, based on his observation, he wrote the entire anatomy for the human body. This was a problem because there are some differences between the animal anatomy and the human anatomy. Around the same time, guys, the recurrent laryngeal nerve discovery was done. Arterial venous blood differences were recognized. Heart valve and the pulsation mechanisms were also identified. In the year 1210 into the Common Era, Al-Nabis from Cairo, that is 815 years ago, he gave the correct description of the pulmonary circulation, and this was a direct challenge to the Galenic dogma. So as per the Galenic dogma, you see the blood is getting into the heart's right atrium and then going into the right ventricle. But instead of getting into the pulmonary trunk, what Galen is saying is that the blood through the pores that is present in the septum is getting into the left ventricle directly. Now Al-Nabis corrected it. He said that look, the blood that comes into the right atrium, it enters inside of the right ventricle, and then the blood is going into the pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins, and then finally it is getting inside of the left atrium and the left ventricle, and then finally into aorta. So this was our Al-Nabis model, which was more accurate than the Galenic model. And imagine this correction happened after a period of 1000 years into the Common Era. So for a period of around 1000 years, people were studying anatomy that was based off animal studies, and this was the limitation was obviously because the human dissections were not allowed. In the year 1315, the first manual on human dissection was written by performing dissection on female corpse, and this was done by Mondino in Italy. And the fact of the matter is that Mondino was highly influenced by Galen. He was a demonstrator. He dictated the Galenic test and his assistants were performing the dissection. So what he wrote was not something very revolutionary. It was just a better form of what Galen's text has already said. What is more interesting is what happened in 1543, and this was a landmark day for anatomy, guys, because in the University of Padua, Italy, the first illustrated human atlas was published by Andreas Vesalius. And this was called as the De Humani Corporis Fabrica, and this was a revolutionary human text because it corrected many Galenic errors. Note that, guys, Andreas Vesalius is regarded as the father of modern anatomy, and anatomy was also conducted before the Common Era by Herophilus in year 335 before the Common Era, and Herophilus is regarded as the father of ancient anatomy. In 1497, the term physiology was formally introduced by Jean Farel. The year 1628 is of importance because this is the year when the birth of the modern physiology happened. In this year, William Harvey demonstrated the systemic circulation. And later on, in the year 1661, the missing links in the William Harvey's theory were later on discovered by Malfigi Marcello. Then these missing links were nothing but the capillaries. In 1838, the formulation of cell theory happened by Theodor Schwann and Skeldon, and it was established that cell is the fundamental unit of life. So in the year 1865, the concept of myelin interior came into picture, and it was given by Claude Bernard from France. The core idea of this concept, guys, is that no matter what is happening outside the body will always try to maintain a constant status as far as the various parameters is concerned. Although Claude Bernard gave the term myelin interior, later on the term homeostasis was coined to indicate the same idea. In the year 1887, the first experimental physiology lab was set up at Harvard. So in the year 1891, guys, the famous conditioned physiological responses were recorded by Ivan Pavlov in dogs. So basically he rang the bell, and the dogs were conditioned to a point where every time the bell rang, the dogs started to salivate. Next, in the year 1922, isolation of insulin happened by Charles and Banting from Canada. And in 1926, the term homeostasis was coined by Walter Buchanan. 1952, we came to know about the ionic mechanisms of nerve impulse. This was given by Alan Hodgkin and Andrew Huxley. Sliding filament theory of muscle contraction came into picture in 1954. In 1997, the International Physiome Project started. And this project is, already we discussed in the beginning, is continuing till date. The idea is to, create a machine, feed in all the normal biological parameters of a human being, and then, change these parameters in the machine and see how the machine is responding to these changes. How are the other parameters getting influenced by change of one or two parameters? So the idea is to simulate the normal and the pathological processes at every biological levels. Physiome means physio plus om. Physio is life and home is the whole. And now finally we are in the 21st century, and probably when a different timeline will be created in the future, let's say in the year 2150, people will be then looking back at this. Probably they will have AI and stuff integrated into every field, and these things might be considered a little primitive.